thank you all for being here. Start with an opening statement from Coach, and then we'll take questions.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Obviously just finished up day 2 of camp, and really pleased with where we're at. I know there's gonna be a lot of questions about like where we're, how the comfort and the accessibility of having year 2 guys in a year 2 system it's been really clean, especially those returning guys. Not too many. We've amplified the install, and so some of those older guys were in different sets a lot earlier than we would be, operating at a pretty high level, especially number 1. So I'm excited where we're at. We've had some really good plays these last couple of days. We've had some things that we need to clean up. I do think just going off the cusp, going off summer, and then seeing these last couple of days, I do think we have a really good chance to be really good on offense. We got a long ways to go, but I'm really excited about the group. And with that, we'll just start with questions.
Thank you, Coach. We'll start with Justin and then Dave.
So now that Oscar Rios is back and healthy, what do you think about the backup quarterback competition? And what are you hoping to see out of those guys over the next few weeks?
In my opinion right now, it's probably between Sawyer and Luke for that number 2 spot. Mixing Oscar in there, he just, with him not getting the entire spring, like really putting behind the 8 ball. And I'm not saying he won't have an opportunity to play this year. It's just he needs a lot of reps, and there's not a ton of reps. When you're having to rep, 3 or 4 different quarterbacks, there's just not a whole lot of reps to go around. And then the work that Sawyer and Luke have, put together, they deserve it. And they've made a lot of progress. I'm really excited about those 2 guys. They're still young. They're going to make young guy mistakes. But at the same time, where they're at in their development is light years from where I was when I was at the age. So I really do think both those guys have bright futures, and I'm excited about their progress. And we'll make a decision pretty quick, in my opinion, because I want to name a number 2 and start really dialing some reps for those guys. Like I said, even repping 3 guys with Noah, Sawyer, and Luke getting the majority of the reps, it's just hard because I want those guys to have more. And the only way to do that is you gotta prioritize which one gets it.
David and then Michael.
Coach Sawyer Anderson has really stood out the first 2 days. What kind of is the big thing for him that you like about his skill set, and what could potentially elevate him to that number 2 position?
Well, the one thing that you don't get to see as much in practice, because obviously you don't want to, obviously you're staying off the quarterback. Stay off the quarterback. We don't want to lose a quarterback off of something silly. But the one thing that Sawyer can do is he can run, and he's very explosive. He's a 20-plus mile per hour guy. One of the fastest mid-skill guys that we have. And he's obviously very smart, can process extremely well, very coachable, can throw it. He does a really good job throwing it at any arm angle. So when there are some off-platform throws or some times where he has to create outside the pocket, and he's in an awkward position, he can still make the throw. But like the cool thing about Sawyer is he was in Braden Locke's hip last year. They became best friends. And so listening to Braden and Noah go through the everydays of being the backup and the starter, he gained a ton of knowledge and a ton of preparation through that experience, and it's really paid off. So I just, I want to keep seeing consistency from him. I want to continue to see him play at a really high level. Like I said, I need to find a way to get, those young guys a little bit more reps, but it's just a little bit, it's tough because I don't want to take away from Noah. And so, but he's done a great job. He's always prepared. He's fun to coach, and like I said, I think he has a really bright future. So, I agree with you. I think he's really performed at a high level these last couple of days, especially for how old he is.
Michael and then Cole.
What do you think makes Josh Oglesby an effective coach?
His ability to relate to his players. He just has an infectious personality. It's one of those. He played O-line. Obviously he's a 5-star. He was an All-American. He went through some tough times in college. Played on some really good football teams. But if Josh Oglesby wasn't a coach and say he was, worked in any other industry, he'd still be the most popular guy. He would still be the most liked guy. Now, he does demand a high standard from those O-linemen, but they love him. And he can develop, and I love him. I've grown, going into this thing, I was a little bit nervous about it because, you know, the philosophies of what he's from and where I'm from don't mix. You know, air raid, up-tempo, throw the ball, you know, versus 12, 13 personnel under center, play with a fullback is his, you know, in his mind is how you play football, right? And somehow we became really, really close over the last season. And it's gotten to a point where I don't see myself without him. Like, he's my guy. He's my O-line coach. And we have so much trust with one another, and we've gotten this really genuine relationship that, you know, we really enjoy being around each other and working with each other. But the kids love him. You know, like, I'll walk past his office, and his office, you know, is big enough, but it's not big enough to have 18 linemen in there. And every time there's 18 linemen. And they might be watching tape. They may be watching YouTube. They might be talking about something, you know, the O-linemen, they talk about weird stuff all the time. But he just does a really good job of getting to know those kids, and those kids, they trust him and they love him. And then he's a really good development coach. Like, he develops guys better than I've ever been around. Part of it's because he's played the position. He's really, really smart. He knows football, but he really knows how to personalize each relationship and attack the development that kid needs. And, you know, I think anytime we bring a kid on campus that's an O-lineman that has ability at all, it may not be good year one. It may not be good year two, but year three, I have a lot of confidence that kid's going to be able to play because of Oglesby.
Cole and Justin.
The three transfer receivers, Jordan, DJ, Rodney, how did they look the first couple of days, and have any of those stood out or turned heads just for the first couple of practices?
Going, you know, starting in the spring, I fell in love with Rodney. And you know, when you're in the transfer portal and you're evaluating guys, it's a little bit easier than high school because you're seeing them do it. Well, if you go back to Rod's tape, like, he's catching game-winning touchdown passes in the Big 12 against Kansas, you know, and so there's kind of a warrior component to Rodney that I really, really like. And then to me, if you want to play in the slot, one is you better have great feel for space, and you better be really tough. Well, Rod's both of those. And then the other thing about Rodney is, like, when you put the ball in play and you put it in his hands, he's going to be really, really tough to tackle because he's very twitchy, right? So I'm really excited about Rod. I think he's going to bring a ton of value for us. Jay Ross is very explosive, very smooth, and so is DJ. DJ is about as explosive of a receiver that we have on our team. Both those guys still learning the scheme, you know. We have added, and we are way more complex than people give us credit for. And it's the same thing that we were talking about last year with Trey Spivey. Him coming here, learning a new system. We were doing a lot more, trying to line up, execute the assignment, playing fast, doing all these other details that we expect them to do. Well, I feel like DJ and Jordan are kind of on that same train. They're just trying to figure it out, trying to be consistent, but both of them are really, really talented.
Justin and Brian.
There still needs to be some steps with, you know, potentially adding a guy like Ismail Mahdi back in the mix. But what do you tell some of the running backs who are competing for reps just in case a situation like that were to happen?
You know, we tell them, like, hey, if we were to bring Mahdi back, and I think if you were to ask Ked, Quincy, you know, even Antoine, because Antoine's such a freaking good teammate, man. Wesley, the guys that were here last year, if you asked them, like, hey, are you guys good with us bringing Mahdi back? Their answer would be hell yeah, because they love him. And Mahdi was that type of teammate. And so there's not going to be any, if that were to go through, there wouldn't be any animosity. Now, I will say this, and I'm going to tell Mahdi the same thing if this ends up working out. Quincy and Ked are playing at a high level, not just because you came back and you were the top rusher last year. Like, this is a new season. Those guys have been through, you know, a lot of work this year, and they're looking really good. So it's just going to be a competition, just like it was the year before. And I think Quincy and Ked and Antoine and Wesley and Corn, they believe in themselves as well. I don't ever. That's the cool thing about Mahdi, because he was such a good teammate and he was loved by his the team. Is like bringing a guy like that in, everybody's going to support it. Versus bringing a guy in that, yeah, he was the best player, or he was the best player in that room last year, had some injuries, so we got a little bit more opportunity. But it makes it so much easier that they loved him. And so I don't see it being a problem. If it does work out, I would love to have him back. We'll see what type of shape he's in. You know, he might have been cooking too much barbecue, eating too much barbecue. I don't know. So we got to figure out if Marty can move still, but we'll see.
Brian and then David.
With the number of receivers that you guys have and the possibility of going super deep in that, how do you work with Bobby to figure out how you get these guys reps early on to identify maybe a pecking order and know how you're going to establish that?
I really leave it up to Bobby because Bobby has the best feel of the room, right? And so he does a great job of inserting guys in specific times in practice. The other thing that we've done is we've let Noah take some 2 reps just to get used to, if Gio took all the 1s at the A, does Roddy get a ball from Noah? Does Roddy get to step on the field with Noah? And I wanted that to happen because Roddy's going to be on the field on Saturday with Noah. Mizell the same way. Mizell, we threw a deep skinny to Mizell today with the 1s. And Mizell's technically right now a 2 behind Chris Hunter. And we scored, but we wanted to find ways to make sure that they're getting quality play with number 1. And I think, we do a good job of that. And Bobby, he's probably the best I've ever been around at managing those type of numbers, of making sure that everybody feels secure and getting the opportunity that they deserve. And so we'll continue to do that, continue to build that, mix and match, and make sure they're all getting the fair opportunities that they deserve.
David and then Michael.
Seth, one of the instruction here is you're working a lot with the running backs on their route running. And what are the key elements and what you're asking them to do and teaching in those moments?
To me, and we were watching tape the other day, and it's even like Quincy. Quincy coming out of the portal from Portland State, like a lot of his stuff was like split out in like the empty packages. Like he was more of like a scat back type of player. Now we just hit a home run. We got lucky, with our evaluation on him being actual like very explosive in between the tackles. But like, it's just like anything. If we're gonna split them out in an empty set or split them out in a slot position, we can't expect them to be as detailed on route running if we're not working on it. And just like if you're working on your aiming point on mid-zone, you're working on your aiming point on counter, you're working on your ball security, all that stuff. Like to me, it's just all the same. And so we got to really, find time and practice. If we want to throw those guys the ball, we got to find ways, to be really efficient at the fundamentals of running routes. And so finding ways to do that as much as I can in practice is going to be really helpful.
Michael and then Davian.
You alluded to Isaiah Mizell had a really big day today. We saw some run after catch, saw him go up and get a deep ball. How would you assess his progress?
I mean, night and day from where he was last year. Completely different player, and honestly, probably a completely different person in a sense and it just goes back, man, like you got to have some patience with young kids. And you see his skill set. So last year his skill set was he was really fast, but that was really it. He didn't even know how to play receiver really. He didn't have a great feel for it, but he knew how to run. And then we got into a bind early in the season with Hutt going down, Chris Hunter going down. Some other guys were a little banged up where he had to play. And we were depending on a freshman that probably wasn't ready to truly play. And there was some busted routes, and then all of a sudden it looks like, what are they running? Well, we ran it over, but Mizell decided to run it out. You know what I mean? And but he's been awesome. And the greatest thing about Mizell, not only like has he developed as a receiver that we can really depend on. Now he's got some work to do still. I'm not saying he's a finished product, but I trust him. And I think that becomes with maturity. The way he approached the offseason, the way he approached winter conditioning, the way he approached summer. That's what's paying off for him right now is his mentality and the way he's attacking his opportunity. So I'm excited about him.
Our last two will be Damian and then Justin.
So Lyle described Ked and Quincy with 2 words: bully ball. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
I love it because I told Ked, if anybody tackles you, if you get tackled by a single person this year, I'm taking you out. Because he's a powerful running back, and it should take 2 to bring that sucker down. And Quincy's the same way. And the great thing about both of those dudes is they're explosive through the tackles. Like when they see space and they're patient and they decide to explode, both of them can go. They're not just big backs that can't run. They both have a little juice to them. you know, and it's almost like it doesn't get, it doesn't get probably seen or talked about enough that both of those guys can run. Like, I remember going to the summer workouts and watching these guys run a couple times, and they had these competitions, and Quincy was beating Gio at times, and Gio's really, really explosive and really fast, you know, and so those guys can really go. I'm really excited about both of those dudes, and they've worked extremely hard. They're both really strong, and probably the best thing about them is they're both great teammates. You know, that's the way that room goes, and Lyle's done a great job because he was in it last year, but getting those guys to truly believe in what we're trying to do and not get carried away with the carries or the touches. They know what the job is, and obviously they have aspirations to be the running back one, sure, but they also want to win, and they love their teammates and they love this university. So there's not two guys I'd rather go to war with than Ked and Quincy.
We'll finish up with Justin.
So 10 years ago, you started your coaching journey at Bowling Green. What do you remember about your first training camp there, and how do you reflect on the last decade of being a coach?
Well, I mean, looking back at it now, I probably didn't know what I was doing. You know, I thought I did, but I was coaching wideouts. I had a lot of fun. I realized, you know, it was my very first job. I was doing it with some of my best friends. My quarterback GA when I played at Texas Tech was the OC, so I was really close with him. We had a Texas high school football coach, legend, Mike Jinks as the head coach. It was just a bunch of Texas guys with a bunch of Texas Tech ties. And so we had a lot of fun. Now, we weren't very good. That's the problem. And but it was fun. I really, that first year, I remember thinking, like, I really enjoyed coaching wideouts because they were the best players on the field. You know, I think it was a natural fit for me because playing quarterback and getting to know your receivers and taking them out and doing, you know, throwing routes and talking to them in the summers and stuff like that when the coaches aren't around. It just finally felt natural to me, and I learned a lot. You know, I learned a lot how to manage the room. That was a big deal. Like talking about Bobby Wade, you know, that was probably my biggest welcome to college football. Is like, oh, you want to coach the receivers? Well, there's a bunch of alpha prima donnas in that room that expect the ball every play. So good luck managing that. And but it was fun, and I had a great time. And I always remember, like, we brought my little brother on. He didn't have any offers, and I remember Jinx coming up to me and said, "When are we going to offer your brother?" I said, "I don't want to be the one to do it. If we believe in him, we believe in him." We offered him. He ended up being a freshman starter for us, so it was fun. It was fun to get to coach my brother for a little bit. So yeah, that's what I remember.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate y'all.
Hey, Seth,